guys, it's Miss Julia again. I have a watercolor little fun challenge for you. This one is geared to whatever age feels they can handle it. So I'm gonna go ahead and do this. It's a fun little exercise, so it's more for technique. So this is gonna be, I'm just gonna do a leaf, okay? And on this leaf, I'm just gonna jag the edge a little bit. I am working with a little bit darker pencil than you're used to. You're used to using a 2H. I'm using an HB because I want to be able to see it through the paint. Okay, so just the basic shape. I'm going to put a little dew. So I'm going to put a couple little droplets of water. So I'm just going to put a stem right up the middle. I'm going to put a few little spine stems in the center here. Okay, now I'm going to take a yellow crayon and I'm going to go up the center. I'm going to press pretty good. I'm going up the center of this leaf with the yellow crayon. The crayon will act like a resist. Just Crayola, nothing fancy. Okay. Okay, now I'm going to take my paint. And if you have paint at home, you just need yellow, blue, and green. So I'm going to take my yellow first, make a little puddle in my well. So if you're working with a tube of watercolor paint, just put it in on a plate, a little bit of color on a plate, or if you have an empty palette, great. I usually like to get my colors ready first. I'm using phthalo blue, but you can use whatever blue you have at home. Don't make your parents go out and get anything new. Just work with what you got. And then I'm going to use a little green. Just remember, blue and yellow make green, so if you don't have green at home, you can make your own by mixing the two together. Okay. And I figure I take a tray that doesn't have green. All right, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to soak my paper first. So I'm going to rinse my brush, rinse it in the clean water to get the dirty water out of it. Don't worry if you got a little phantom color on there. That's just going to be part of the painting anyway. So I'm wetting the whole thing. I want to have a nice gloss. It's important that this step is wet. So you should have a good shine. So take your time, let it soak in. Really move those. You don't want any puddles. You want to be able to go like this and see puddles though when you touch it. So I'm going to take my yellow now, and I'm just going to flip my brush. I don't want to be neat. Don't go be all neat. Just flip that brush. You want it to look natural, not polka dotted. So by flipping your brush, you really don't have any control. It's great. And then you want to go in with blue, and you're kind of mixing it a little with your yellow. So you're going to get a bit of a green shade. And we're going right on top of the leaf. Keep your brush moving. Watch for puddles forming. You don't want any puddles forming. So if you have a puddle, don't use Kleenex. Kleenex will wreck your wash. Dry your brush off and absorb up any little puddles that might be forming on your painting, and then move on to your green. So the green is just gonna kind of add another layer to this, right over top. But I'm not, if you notice, I'm not covering over the blues that are there. I'm not covering over the yellows. I'm just making them next to each other so that they can kind of bleed into one another and form a different shade of green and a different shade of yellow. Make sure you get all the edges. Rinse your brush, put it on your rag, and I'm just going to grab a little plastic wrap. So I'm going to take a little plastic wrap, a good foot. take a little Kleenex and you're going to absorb up the edge of your tape because you don't want that to backwash onto your picture. Before you put your plastic wrap on, wrinkle it because we want some edges. So I'm giving it a good squish. So I go like this. Open it up. Start, if you're right-handed, start on your left-hand side because it's easier to pull it towards the hand you use. And I'm just going to put it on here and I'm going to crumple it as I'm laying it down. Once you've laid it down though, don't keep lifting it because then you take all of the wetness off your page. You should be able to go like this and create a puddle. It should be that wet. By adding more water to it, really doesn't work. It's the pigment that it's catching on to. So you'd have to add more paint. If you find it's too dry, add more paint and water, not just water. So you can already see the cool edges that it's going to form. So we just want to crumple that and let it dry. It's going to take 20 minutes, half an hour. So we'll be in touch. Okay, I've waited about a half an hour, 45 minutes. You want to make sure when you lift the plastic, you're not developing a little puddle. Then you know that it's dry enough to take the plastic off. If you have a puddle, just set it back down and let it dry a little bit longer. So I'm going to peel this off and you can kind of see the really cool background it made. So it already looks leafy, like even looks like creases in the leaf here too. So the first thing we want to do is we want to make our background recede and our foreground come forward. So in order to do that, we need to make the background cooler. So I'm just going to take and water down my blue, which I'm using phthalo blue here, but ultramarine blue is great. Any blue is fine right now. So what we're going to do is we're going to glaze. So glaze is thin. Your paint is going to be thin. And you're just going to take and glaze right over top. We don't want to scrub because we don't want to lose that marbling that we did with the plastic. So we're just thin layers. So I'm not rubbing back and forth. I'm just going in between all the little jets of my, and you can still see your marbling through the paint, but it's cooler. So it's setting back and now your leaf is really coming forward. So I'm going to go like this. Not going to lose that marbling right on the edge. And it's best to use a little bit fatter brush to do a glaze like this because it's less streaky than if you just did a little brush. But if you have like a medium round or a flat filbert, that would be fine too. Just whatever's comfortable, but a little tiny brush would not probably do it. It's better to get a little wider brush. Okay, so now to bring the leaf forward, I'm going to take yellow. So yellow is warm. Warm colors come forward, cool colors recede. So we're just going to glaze this with a coat of yellow, a little bit of water to move the yellow around. So this leaf is going to just jump. Now, also, as I'm doing this, I'm also rehydrating all the paint that's underneath. So while it's wet, I'm going to take a nail. So those of you guys that have been in my class before, we just use a nail, just a regular nail. And you're going to take and you're going to lightly score. You don't have to press very hard. You're going to put all those little veins that come out in a leaf. Now, if you don't see them right away, watch what happens when you just put a touch of green on them. Just going to tap that with a little green. It goes into those little scores that you've done. So you just kind of float a little green in there and you'll see them show up. And it just gives your leaf an extra texture. So you can see the scoring. It almost looks like I'm writing with something, but really I'm just scratching the paper. So the paper does have to be wet and there has to be color that will go into it for it to work. So you're adding all these little veins in your leaf to give your leaf that natural texture. Now notice that the yellow, your core of your leaf is already there because we did that with the yellow crayon. So there's your texture on your leaf. Now I'm going to take a small brush now and I'm going to take my green and I'm just going to tap a little bit onto the bottom edge of each circle. That's the droplets of water on the leaf. And I'm just going to put those on. Okay, add a little shadow. And just pull that down into my leaf. If I want to create a bit of a curl, I can just take one side of the leaf and just deepen it slightly. You can use your blue as well if you want. Not too much blue because we don't want to lose it against the background. So just along the spine of the leaf, go down the stem, add that little bit. Go in underneath those spines. Little green. Now, each droplet is going to cast a shadow on the leaf. So we're going to go in, I'm going to use Payne's Gray. Payne's Gray is kind of a blue-based dark color. The color combination to get a Payne's Gray is ultramarine blue and black. If you don't have any of those colors, you can use the blue that you're using and just add a little black paint to it. So I'm going to take and just add a little shadow below each droplet. Not above, because you want the bubbles to look raised. So in order for them to look raised, they have to have a shadow at the bottom only. Now I'm going to take my scoring tool here, my nail, and I'm just going to score the bottom of that bubble so that the shadow stays under the bubble and not so much on the bubble. A little bit can bleed onto the bubble. It does look a little bit better if it has just a tiny bit on the bubble too. Okay, now we have to kind of let this dry a bit, and for your final touches on this, we will come back in a minute and I will finalize the final touches on this when it's a little drier. Okay, have fun. Okay, now that our painting is dry, we're going to go back and we're going to start darkening up a few things. So I'm going to take my Payne's Gray and I'm going to add a little shadow to give the leaf a lift. So I'm going to add a little pointed shadow here. I'm going to go right down the edge and let it fade out. Okay. Now I'm going to take and I'm going to add ripples. I'm going to disturb this. So it looks like it's sitting in water. Take a damp brush and fade one edge of each ripple. So this little end of the leaf would cause some disturbance in the water too. All right. So I'm just going to add a little bit on this side just to give it a little contrast so you can see the edge of this leaf, this side of the leaf. Okay. Now, I'm kind of thinking if the leaf was in the water, we could add the slightest little bit of orange to it, or a red, just a glaze, so it has the look of a fall leaf. So I'm going to kind of go like this, and I'm going to create a curl in the leaf right at the end. So I'm just going to go, just glaze it to get a hint of red. This also makes the leaf pop a little more too against the water. And it's going to show off the little dew bubbles that are on the them with no orange on it. I'm making it very thin so that I'm not really covering the other colors, I'm just adding to it. The red a little. So I'm going to kind of show off the little rough edges that we put on this leaf in the beginning. All right, and now I'm going to take my nail. What did I do with it? There it is. So I'm going to take my little nail and I'm going to score the edge where I want that curl so it stays kind of crisp. And then I'm going to take my little tiny brush and I'm going to take a little of the Payne's Gray and I'm just going to shade it slightly. Right on that edge. And that little bit of cool color on the curl also makes it lift a little bit more like that. So now I'm going to just add a little shadow at this end, a little shadow on the end here, kind of repeat it so it's almost like reflection. Just go a little bit darker just under that rim. Sometimes the watercolor goes on nice and dark and then it fades. Okay, now that this is dry, I'm going to take a little bit of white chalk, or you could use a gel pen for this, and I'm going to highlight the top of each little dew bubble so they kind of stand out. And then I'm going to add a little touch of highlight here, and I'm going to just skim a little in my water. You could use the Chinese white watercolor as well, or you can use a gel pen, or even sometimes just for the dew bubbles on here, you could use a little bit of, if you don't have any white at home, you can use whiteout from liquid paper. You can use that. Just wherever you want to add a little lift, you can add a little touch of light. All right, and I think we're pretty much done, other than I want to put just a bit of depth. I'm going to add a little more Payne's Gray and blue, and I'm just going to glaze the bottom of my picture, just random, in around my white, and I'm just going to glaze the bottom a little darker just to give it a bit more depth. And then I'm going to let that fade up into the upper part of the picture. All right. And then just take my Payne's Gray and add those few little curves, a little shadow on those curves. There you go. I don't really want an outline, we're just enhancing shadow. Okay, and I think we're done. All right, sign your painting and share it with us. And then we can all kind of, and add to it, for those of you guys that have been in my classes for a little bit, go ahead and add to it and have some fun.